any discussion is not necessarily the views of all involved. The goal is to start open and honest discussion in the Christian worldview. Like all things, weigh what you hear with what you know and join us in our pursuit for the truth. Enjoy the podcast.
Josh, please save us. Get us back on the rails.
Are you saying Samuel was a ghostwriter?
Yeah, Jill, do you want to get into that?
I could. Yeah, sure.
I could, but I won't.
The transitions are so good in this episode.
Hey, we could talk about this thing, but we're just not going to.
All right, I'd like to welcome everyone to Second Rate Saints. I'm one of your hosts here, Caleb. Josh is trying to interrupt me here, but that's okay. To my left is...
I'm Joshua, and I present that. I was not trying to interrupt. I was laughing. To my left is...
I'm Joel.
Sweet. Josh and I are off to a good start. We're going to be competing for mic time this whole episode. No, it's almost everyone's here. We're just missing Stuart.
One day. Big sad.
Yeah. Joel.
Yeah.
Do we do things on the internet?
Yeah, we've been consistently uploading. If you'd like to get a hold of us, you can email us at secondratesaints@gmail.com. You can follow us on our Twitter and our Instagram. We're hoping to have some cool announcements out decently soon. If you'd like to donate to the expansion of Second Rate Saints, we do have a Buy Me a Coffee what is it? The link is buymeacoffee.com/Second Rate Saints.
And there'll be a link on the website.
Yep. Yeah, there'll be a link on the website as well. And if you'd like to, donate to what we're doing here as whatever it is we're doing here, we really appreciate that. And that doesn't sound enthusiastic, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So, unfortunately,
is that the worst plug ever, Colton? Is that what you're looking at me like that?
No, I'm looking at Josh.
Oh, yeah.
Josh forgot how headphones work, but it's okay. He looks cool.
Mm-hmm.
That's a word for it, yeah.
Normally, this is a segment where we do What Have You Read? But
instead, we're going to talk about Blade Runner.
Nope.
We already did that.
No, we are not.
We talked about Android's Dream of Electric Sheep.
That's the same thing.
Then I watched the movie.
You've seen it since?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we watched it last week.
Oh.
No, we watched it this week.
Oh.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's breaking Joel's brain. He's lost track of time.
That's part of the problem.
Brutally honest, I'm halfway through 8 books, and I don't have anything to share for this week. It's bad. I need to actually finish the books that I've started. And everybody else is in the same boat, yeah?
Yeah, I think we're all faltering either finishing a book or we're going through longer books. And so it's harder to talk about.
I simply just don't have time to read. I'm in my master's program learning 2 languages at the same time and working more hours than normal because it's the season when I work more.
Excuses.
Which is why we're talking about The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson.
We've already talked about that.
Oh, yeah. Have we actually?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't think we did.
I don't think we
I
have.
haven't talked about it enough. What a great book. Anyways, we're not going to cover What Have You Read this week. But we would love to know what you guys are reading. So if you have any books that you would suggest we read, but also that you would just like to tell somebody about, reach out to the podcast. It might make its way into a Thoughts in Real Time episode, or it might make its way into a Thoughts in Real Time. A book review.
So,
man.
There are 2 books that we have been recommended that I have read from listeners. One of which being the Anarchy book. I can't remember exactly.
Christianity and Anarchy, which we did review.
Yes.
Probably episode 30
that was
around there.
So
what was the other book?
I can't remember. I'm sorry. It was so long ago. But
yeah, it was early on. We ended up getting a couple of book recommendations.
If you recommend the book, I will try to read it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a
if
promise
it sounds
from
interesting.
Colton.
Yep.
Colton is promising that. I don't want to do that.
Or if one of us has read the book that you've recommended already, then we
could
do a review of it,
Yeah.
even if we haven't read it in many years.
Here's the thing.
We like
I
talking
would
about
love
books.
to read book recommendations, but I'm not going to open myself up to anything willy-nilly.
Yeah, you know what?
Christianity and Anarchy is fascinating read. Also not great, in my opinion.
But instead, means we can just hop right into our topic.
Yeah. Let's get into it.
Yeah.
We're continuing our Samuel episode
Yeah.
series.
So, Josh,
Yes.
do you want to, before you get into the text itself,
Yeah.
do you mind doing a previously on Samuel?
Yes. Previously on Samuel, we talked about the death of Samuel, sadly, in chapter 25.
So it's prophecy from here on out.
Why did we have to jump into that immediately? So the author of 1st and 2nd Samuel is probably not Samuel for the
At
audience
least
member.
at this point, it's definitely not. Unless at Endor, he just kind of stuck. That's we're not talking about that yet.
Endor?
After,
the Witch
after
of Endor.
Endor.
Are you saying Samuel was a ghostwriter?
At first, I thought you said Ghost Rider, like the Nick Cage movie.
Yeah. I think so. Here's my idea, and I'll tell you guys about this more after. I got a great idea, guys. Every time you guys have said, this is already getting off the rails, but every time you've said previously on Samuel, my thought is I want to cast First Samuel as an Amazon original as the finale to the series.
Okay.
What?
But I'll talk more about that later.
Previously on Samuel.
Yeah.
Samuel.
Nicolas
Josh,
Cage
please,
plays a big
please
part.
save us. Get us back on the rails.
Okay. Previously on Samuel, David and Abigail is the title of the story. What we talked about was David leaves Paran and goes to a man's house named Nabal and his wife Abigail. David goes during a festival to go get food from and like supplies from a man who his men have helped protect his sheep.
Mhm.
And all the shepherds who come back with the sheep, depending on if they've gained more sheep or if they've lost sheep, the owner of the land will provide benefits for them. I'd be like, hey, you did a great job. Well done, good and faithful servant. And David goes to the man and he says, hey, I've protected your sheep from animals and other things. And David knows as a shepherd himself back in the day that, hey, this is Nabal is a supporter of Saul because that area where they lived was rescued by Saul early on in Saul's career as king. And so Nabal says, who's this David that I should care about him? And kind of mocks David and rejects him and sends him to leave. And David goes, how dare you disrespect my men and me and not give us what we are due, right? We've spent time and hours and put ourselves in danger to protect your sheep. So he goes out to kill the man and everything basically that this man owns. And Abigail hears about this, the wife of Nabal, and intercedes on her servants and everyone else's behalf by giving David the stuff.
Yeah. Well, he goes to like slaughter him.
Oh yeah.
It's bad.
Yeah.
Like he's got wrath up to his blinding his eyes.
Yeah. And so she's like, hey, don't do this. This isn't, you don't want to do this. This would be bad. Here's the stuff. Please protect our people. It's a very similar pattern to Rahab and other people that have like gotten in the way of intercession. And he goes, thank you so much for stopping me. This was off. Like what I'm about to do was not good. You saved me from acting on my own will rather than God's. Thank you. And so she says, hey, may all your enemies suffer the fate that Nabal would have. May they be cursed and blah, 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 that kind of event. And Nabal goes back. She goes back. Nabal's drunk. She then tells her husband a few days later, when he's not drunk, what happened. And his heart is stricken, and he lives with this guilt for 10 days and then dies. The Lord strikes him. And then David marries Abigail for various political and reasons. And now she's without a husband. And David is available because Michal, his wife through Saul, got married off to another guy. So he takes on Abigail for many reasons, but marries her. And that leaves us where we are in chapter 26. We'll be going through chapter 26 and 27 and a little bit of 28 because 28 begins with the ending of chapter 27.
Yeah. A lot of commentators lump the first two verses in with the previous chapter.
It seems the best way to do it.
It makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Do a quick study on, like, the listener, do a quick study on where the verse system comes from and like the chapter system. It's very interesting.
Quick study.
Well,
Yeah.
it'll help your
Yeah.
understanding of the Bible.
Is true.
The English Bible.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, you can get some translations that are like the Reader's Bible, where it just takes older verse partitions out of it.
Yeah.
Which is a good call.
Yeah.
I have a copy of that. It
Yeah. But
helped
if
me
you're
for
want-
about a month, and then
It's good if you're wanting to read it. It's bad if you're trying to find verses and stuff.
Yes.
well, mainly because you can't find it.
Yeah, because they don't exist.
And that's part of the point is you'll find out that like the verses were a memorization system from certain priests at certain times, and so they introduced them for their own benefit, and then it became a standard thing.
Right.
They're not original to the text.
You're telling me that as they scribed these things, they did just put 1, 2.
So, Josh, why are we talking about these two in a small bit of chapters together?
Because they fit together in chapter 26 talks about David being fleeing from Saul again after though Saul promised not to chase after him. And then where David goes. And this leads David onto a whole nother arc. Before he was being chased in Israel, now he's living outside of Israel.
Yep.
This is starting that second.
And he once again reconciles with Saul and then unreconciles with him the next chapter.
Yes. So this is where we are. Then the Ziphites came to Saul at Gibeah, saying, "Is not David hiding himself in the hills of Hiklah, which is on the east of Jeshimon?" So Saul arose and went down to the wilderness of Ziph with 3,000 chosen men of Israel to seek David in the wilderness of Ziph. And Saul encamped on the hill of Hiklah, which is beside the road on the east of Jeshimon. But David remained in the wilderness. When he saw that Saul came after him into the wilderness, David sent out spies and learned that Saul had indeed come. Then David rose and came to the place where Saul had encamped. And David saw the place where Saul lay. With Abner the son of Ner, the commander of his army, Saul was lying within the encampment while the army was encamped around him.
Abner, son of Ner, still throws me off all the time.
I know Josh finds it funny. Son of Ner.
No, it's funny because the guy's name, Abner, means my father is Ner.
My father is nerd. Yeah.
My father is Ner, the son of Ner.
It's redundant and repetitive.
It would. What is it? It would be the equivalent of Benjamin, the son of Yamin.
Or like Thompson.
Yeah, Thompson, the son of Tom.
That's an English equivalent for you.
Yeah,
Or like
Yeah.
Nick Nixon.
It's true.
That is true.
Anyway, you know who you are. This sounds awfully familiar, Josh.
yeah. It seems like
This sounds a little bit like chapter 24.
yeah. Kill. Do you want to get into that?
I could. Yeah, sure.
I could, but I
The
won't.
transitions are so
Yeah.
good in this episode.
Hey, we could talk about this thing, but we're just not going
We can talk
to.
about
So
talking about it.
So it's, as will be revealed in the short minutes of this episode up forthcoming. This sounds very reminiscent of chapter 24, which is where David previously spares Saul's life. That time was in the cave. This time it's going
Cuts
to be
off his cloak.
yeah.
Yeah.
This time it's going to be he's going to steal some of his spear and jar.
Yep. As one does.
Yeah.
Well, because in chapter 24, he says, I will not cut him again. Or is that chapter 25? Either one.
24.
Yeah.
But one of the weird things, well, any level of source criticism, people are going to say this is like the same, like, it must be the exact same story, right? Just recorded differently. That could potentially be, I suppose. It depends your thought on editing and whatnot. I know Joel knows more about the historical critical method and stuff about, well, don't look at me like that. You spent more time in Samuel than me, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
that's okay.
And about the compiling work of First and Second Samuel. From a theological reading of Scripture, which is how Scripture should predominantly be read.
Bold claim.
See, you don't think that?
I mean, I think
You don't think theology was the main point of most of the Bible,
okay. That's a
Science
fair
textbook.
point.
What are you talking
okay.
or like
First Samuel's clearly about a man named
We're not
Samuel.
going to talk about hermeneutics right now, right?
No. Although
I mean, when we
already
talk about Samuel, the historical critical method is like up there with the theological messaging, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I think it is for most of the books.
All that I, yeah.
Well, because like even when you look at Chronicles, it just traces back lineage to Adam.
Well,
Right? So like, sure, that's a theological purpose, but there's also like historical critical is valid because they are considering history.
My point is that
Yeah.
the historical critical method will debate on whether or not chapter 26 and 24 are just the same story in different traditions written in different ways, and yet a theological reading of First Samuel, right, who's more concerned about what is the final editor trying to convey in compiling, whether or not that they are different renditions of the same story or different stories, because that could potentially be true, you know.
Just for the listener,
What?
we need
Yeah.
to define terms. What is source critical versus theological viewing of scripture?
So what I think, Caleb, and I'll try and define your term.
Okay.
Is that cool? The primary hermeneutic is that we should be looking at what Scripture is saying about God in this passage and how God interacts with His people. Where I'm saying historical critical would be there's a laying out of events that talk about the history of Israel. It's a whole thing. But
In the interest of not getting narrowed down there,
yeah, well, and I'd love to do an episode on hermeneutics. I think we've done one already.
yeah, we
Did it ever
didn't
get posted?
release it. No,
No,
Okay,
we
cool.
didn't
Good.
release it. Yeah.
Yeah, because after we did that episode, we did more research on it.
Well, you and I did a master's course.
Yeah.
In
Yeah, I didn't know if I
hermeneutics.
wanted to.
No, I don't mean like what do we mean by it? Just like in theology, what does source critical mean?
So, do you mind if I try?
I mean, yeah, sure. It's not documentary hypothesis, but it's close.
Source critical would be that wherever you have a written document, it's not just doesn't happen just in
Yeah, you do
biblical
this with
literature.
any old text.
Any old text. Is this like you take an old text? Are certain portions of it? What are they referencing? Where do they come from? Do different portions of that written text come from different places? Are they referencing different different texts?
Yeah.
And if they do, what is the context of those references? And how is the author or editor compiling this document? How does the meaning change, and how do those, like, it gets very intertextual, meaning like multi-layered textual reference.
Has
It
it
gets very
changed?
complicated very fast.
Biblical lasagna.
That's a great image.
I think so.
It is biblical.
Where
It's
theological reading is, I would say, would be more akin to a canonical approach, right? Which is more like, those stories may have different origins, right?
Mhm.
Like, and you do see this in the compilation of both First and Second Kings, First and Second Samuel, and Chronicles, where they reference, is not the works of such and such a king written down in such and such a book.
Yeah.
Like, we don't have that book anymore.
Yeah, the book of the
Right.
kings and stuff.
The books
isn't
of the kings
book
of Israel
Kings.
and the
Yeah.
books of the kings of Judah.
It's more than likely that they have referenced those, but a theological reading would be cool, awesome. But what is the author trying to get through in this?
Mhm.
Right?
Mhm.
Could he be
through theological thematic purposes, usually, right?
Sure. Yeah.
More thematic reading.
Yeah. I don't know if I don't know.
Still exegetical, but
Yeah, I don't want to get bogged down into those specific camps. Just merely the final form of the text. And so this is a giant, way off to come back around at chapter 26 and chapter 24 do have very, very similar events.
Yeah.
And yet the final editor puts them in the same text, I would argue, to communicate some kind of point. It's not like the editor was just like, well, there's whatever, just slap them together.
Yeah.
Texts are very complicated documents that are
Yeah.
meticulously copied and thought over. I don't think they're just slapped together. And so even if the historical the source criticism model, quote unquote, proves they're the same story, not that you can, that doesn't change that the theological reading would go, no, we should read them in their own in their own presentation as separate to get what the original editor's trying to get across.
the different points between them, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or similar.
I'm sorry, I've talked enough.
No. That was good. The audience has no idea what that. When we start talking about historical critical method versus theological reading versus documentary hypothesis, all these terms, they don't know what we're talking about.
And if you want an accessible book that we've covered already, Understanding Biblical Theology has some really good breakdowns of those different topics.
It's a beautiful book.
It's a good book, but it's also very approachable. Like you can read the first 2 chapters, and that will give you the basis for understanding this conversation we just had.
Yeah.
So I was not there for the reading of chapter 24 when we did it for the podcast episode. What do you think are the main differences between the 2 stories? Besides, like in the chapter 24, he cuts the cloak, whereas in this one, he takes the spear and stuff like that.
Well, we're not there yet.
Okay.
Yeah, we should move through with the narrative a little bit, but I do think that's going to be an interesting aspect to see what the differences are.
Well, yeah. And it seems like with this one, because the areas are not exactly the same.
There's some overlap, but yeah, they're not the same.
Yeah. And
as far as we're aware.
Yeah, because in the first verses that we've read so far, it's the Ziphites talk from Gibeah. The Ziphites talk to Saul in Gibeah, whereas the other one, it was chapter 24. It's David is in En-Gedi.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the region's reference of where David is.
Yeah.
According to my reading, at least. Word biblical commentary. It's like, yeah, there's some overlap in those areas. Like they are, they're referencing different things. The very words they use are different things. But they're the same general-ish kind of region. Yeah. There's some overlap, but they're not explicitly the same place.
Yeah. And that makes sense because like the land of Israel at this point is like 80 kilometers long and like 20 to 25 kilometers wide. It's not a large area. So like you're dealing with like it would be like it'd be like the difference between the wilderness outside the city to the east and then the wilderness on the other side of the city to the west. It'd be like they're around the same place. Yeah. So Saul goes out to go get him. David has spies that are watching. This is very like Robin Hood, like in the forest.
It really is. Yeah.
Like, and he has like men in the trees watching to see if the king's men are coming, stealing from the rich, giving to the poor, except he's not doing that. He's just on the run. Yeah. So let's continue. Then David said to Ahimelech, the Hittite, and to Job's brother, Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, who will go down with me into the camp of Saul? And Abishai said, I will go down with you. So David and Abishai went to the army by night. And there lay Saul sleeping within the encampment, with his spear stuck in the ground at his head. And Abner and the army lay around him. Then Abishai said to David, God has given your enemy into your hand this day. Now please let me pin him to the earth with one stroke of the spear, and I will not strike him twice. But David said to Abishai, do not destroy him, for who can put out his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? And David said, as the Lord lives, the Lord will strike him, for his day will come to die, or he will go down into battle and perish. The Lord forbid that I should put out my hand against the Lord's anointed, but take now the spear that is in his head and the jar of water, and let us go. So David took the spear and the jar of water from Saul's head, and they went away. No man saw it or knew it, nor did any awake, for they were all asleep, because a deep sleep from the Lord had fallen upon them.
So I love that God is kind of like helping him out. Mm-hmm. That God is using the miracle of chloroform on Saul.
The miracle of bedtime.
The spiritual gift of melatonin.
Yeah. Holy NyQuil just kind of got him. And
oh my gosh.
That's cool. Mm-hmm. But it also is like, it feels a little weird because that almost in my mind feels like the Lord is raising his hand against the Lord's anointed. He's
allowed to.
Well, of course he's allowed to. I'm not like arguing the rules.
That's David's whole thing. The Lord's going to kill him.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's there to show that David is not really the one. he's not the aggressor.
Well,
Right?
well,
That
I
is-
think-
yeah.
I think it's interesting, and I think this goes against the idea that they are one in account. Is that Abishai almost learns from the first account,
Mhm.
where David's like, "I'm not going to strike him. I'm not going to raise my hand against the Lord's anointed."
It's a
Where
big
Abishai
thing,
is David's nephew. That's later in Chronicles.
I didn't know that.
I left my commentary at home. Otherwise, I'd give you the verse. So I feel very bad. I'm sorry.
So it's
I'm sorry,
his,
audience.
It's his nephew through his sister, you said?
I
Previously?
believe so. I believe so. Because we talked about this.
Yeah.
And it almost as though Abishai is like, I'll take the blood guilt.
Yeah.
Don't worry. I
Yeah.
got this.
Yeah.
You can be king.
But he goes further and says, no,
Mhm.
no one
Mm-hmm.
must go against him. The Lord has his final day set.
Exactly. And so
Yeah.
I think that's it almost as though as Abishai, what is previously established in chapter 24, Abishai's like, here's a way around it.
Yeah, I can't remember in chapter 24 because David feels super guilty for cutting the hem of the robe. And he's like, man, I shouldn't have even done that. I struck a knife out towards him, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Does he say, I shall not, or no one shall, lest they be cursed? I can't remember. Either way, there is something.
He says,
Weird
do
and
not
different.
destroy him, for who can put out his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless?
That's 26. Right?
And then,
Is that
previously?
24?
24.
24.
Yeah, because here, he's very clear towards Abishai. But I do like that.
The Lord forbid that I should do this thing to my Lord, the Lord's anointed, to put out my hand against him, seeing he is the Lord's anointed. So David persuaded his men with these words and did not permit them to attack Saul.
Mm. So it's similar,
Yeah,
but it does seem to be more specific, at least with Abishai, at least.
it is like very.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
do find it funny that Abishai and him can have this whole discussion just while everyone's asleep.
Well, and
Yeah.
Oh, they're
Okay.
super sleepy.
So there's probably a deeper theological point here that I didn't get to, but like taking his spear and his water pot is such a like I was here like
Mhm.
moment.
Well, yeah.
But like no, but it's like it doesn't. There's a conveyance of I could have killed you, but I didn't.
Of course.
But there's also just a like guy graffitiing the wall. David was here.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Well, there
So, like-
is a slight difference that I find very interesting between both these accounts. Is that the first one in 24, he's in the cave peeing.
Yeah.
Saul is, and David comes and quickly snatches his cloak. Whereas this one, he's fully asleep. He is fully vulnerable. It
Yeah.
not simply that he's alone. He is also completely unarmed and
Well, it's also like
not a threat.
all of his defenses
Mm.
are nothing. God renders all of
They
his
make
like
this a big deal later in the chapter.
yeah. Like all of his army, his bodyguards, his main general dude
Mm-hmm.
can't even protect him.
Oh, I think there's something about what he does take. He takes his means of providing for himself and his means of defending himself.
Yep.
And realizing, oh, God has taken my protection from me.
Mhm.
Right. There's this, I don't know, like if I was to preach it, that's kind of where I would go with that.
Mhm.
If we're going to add symbolism to, or like try to interpret the symbolism of why the water jug, why the spear, it's not just because it's there. Because he could have just written in the sand, David was here, right? Like, maybe he could have, maybe he couldn't have, but I don't know. That's how I would kind of parse that out.
The other aspects of these are they're things that he sustains himself with, but they're also very personal artifacts. Not very many people were allowed to touch the water that Saul drank.
A poison.
Mm-hmm.
Yep,
The whole
especially with he was super during this time. He was super careful
Mm-hmm.
and what's the word? Paranoid.
I would imagine.
Whereas the spear is actually it's probably okay.
This
I
does
like-
confirm his paranoia, though.
It does. I also with the spear, I like to think it's the exact same spear that he keeps throwing at David and missing,
It has
as well
to
as the
be.
other thing. Like times he has the spear with him,
But if he shoves it into the ground while he sleeps, it's not going to be very sharp.
Can
I mean, I'd be paranoid too if everyone was after me.
I give a bad interpretation of why the spear and the water jug?
Sure, why not?
Jesus was stabbed on the side with a spear and water came out.
that is a bad interpretation.
And who can strike the Lord's anointed?
I don't understand. You have to parse it out.
I actually kind of like this interpretation, even though I know it's not true. That's not
Yeah.
what it's meant.
No, but it's just I thought about that when you were like, if we were going to attach some symbolism to
Yeah.
like what was happening, and it was just like I didn't like that connection in my mind, but I just had to voice it.
Jesus is the Lord's anointed. Don't you understand?
Well, he is.
I mean,
Yeah.
A little
And
bit different than Saul.
and the
though.
spear in the water symbolizes that he was here.
yeah. Well, then you're making an argument for, the Holy Grail.
The spear of destiny.
Forever young.
Yeah.
But instead, the spear was turned on himself.
Yeah. Oh man, we're getting in the weeds a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any
No, there
justification
isn't.
for that.
No,
Okay.
that's why I said
I-
it was a bad interpretation of
You guys
it.
keep looking at me like I have something to add to this conversation.
I do think that Joel is right. There
Same.
that's good.
You heard it
Um,
here, folks.
The symbolism of the water and the spear could simply be that they were the things next to him and they're very private to him. But I think that there might be an argument theologically that they are the things of which he protects himself and the nation of Israel, and he provides for the nation of Israel and himself. And it's also being taken away from him. I don't know if it goes as far as the nation of Israel, but certainly for himself.
I love looking at biblical narrative through widening and narrowing scopes, right? Like first we see his servants kind of leaving, and we see the nation, all the
people of
girls
Israel.
to
Yeah.
starting to worship David after
Praise.
praise word, whatever, praise him.
no, whatever.
Sorry, I'll take that one back. Anyways,
They're just
and then
like,
we
has
see,
Saul killed?
bring this up every episode, but and I think this is like the most personal, right? Taking the very spear from his hand that we've seen in every episode so far. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks,
Josh is
Josh opened up a book. That's his first thing he said. So
Oh, okay. So actually, the IVP
the-
Bubble background commentary,
that's
which
a
is a
good commentary.
great resource,
Yeah.
actually brings a significant. It's actually a threat in their mind. So to take someone's weapon and water would be tantamount to threatening his life
I mean, it
in
makes
that
sense.
region
Yeah.
because lack of water, being in the desert, and all
No
that
way to
stuff.
defend yourself.
No way to defend yourself. It's a saying you're surrounded by your army, but I've deprived you of the things that you can defend yourself
And
with.
they've already talked about the Habaru and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
And the idea then, therefore, David was saying, your life is in my hands. And it's also probable that because he's a king, he shouldn't have a spear unless it's ceremonial or standing in as a symbol of office. So it could be not just like a normal spear, but a ceremonial one, or that replacing like a staff, like a scepter.
Oh, got your spear. Sorry. Oh.
And if it's ceremonial, it's also a reference to the kingship. And that by taking it,
mm.
it feeds Saul's paranoia.
I think he just took the water jug because he was thirsty.
I'm going to grab a drink.
had a
Checks
long
his
walk
fridge
back home.
before he leaves.
No, it was Abishai who took it. He just saw it. He was like, I like this one. David grabbed something.
David grabbed the spear. And
Yeah.
he was like, oh, I got to grab something too.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's interesting because you're saying it's a symbol of like what he's protecting.
Yeah.
Like what he's supposed to be as king for Israel. And then it's interesting that they go the other way. It's like, no, it's just a threat.
Fair enough. I mean,
yeah.
that's not an obvious reading to me. Like it seems like David is going out of his way not to threaten Saul's life, but I guess it's more of a warning to me. But
Yeah.
Well, I think same with the hem of his robe. It's supposed to show like, look how close I was to you. I even took your stuff.
Yeah.
You were in my hands.
Yeah.
I had you, but I didn't kill you.
Yeah. You were within my power.
Which I think literally says a little bit later in this chapter.
Mhm.
But the other thing I think is interesting is why did God put them to sleep? Did he know that David and Abishai wouldn't kill him? Or is this supposed to be a test of David's commitment after he made that declaration that he would not put a hand against the king because he promised?
Well, I mean, he definitely knew
Who did?
God.
Well, it's not like
No,
he
it's God,
doesn't know
yeah.
anything.
Yeah. Like,
Do you think God wanted them to kill him every time? And David's like, I won't do it.
it's like, who could strike the Lord's anointed?
You!
And God's like,
My
the other anointed
yeah.
guy.
It's like God wants to use evil.
What?
But, well, it wants to redeem evil. Man, I have a really bad turn of phrase for this episode. But is willing to use the evil committed by an unjust king. But doesn't have the opportunity because David's just too cool.
David was pretty cool.
I think here it's another showing, whether or not it's another showing that God has shifted his purpose of kingship from Saul to David, in that he's providing David the way out.
Well, also, too, David is the Lord's anointed. It's just another demonstration of Saul is so eager to kill the Lord's anointed, but David's like,
For himself.
Yeah.
David never once says to Saul, hey, stop killing me. You're not supposed to kill the
But it
Lord's
is
anointed.
super implied by the text.
Yeah, but in all his appeals, he says, what have I done to you?
Yep.
I haven't done anything to you. Why would you go
Bring
after
out your
me?
evidence, all that.
Yeah, all that. He doesn't once say, you shouldn't eliminate me because I was also anointed by God. And maybe that's because it would just enrage Saul.
Yep.
In that, like...
Well, that's the whole paranoia thing again, yeah.
But no, what I mean is like that David's intentional about it, in that he's not bringing up that argument because it would just make Saul angry and then try to kill him.
Yeah.
And so he's avoiding that declaration of, hey, the Lord made me king. Yeah. That you're just a stand-in until...
Also, Saul's faith in the Lord isn't amazing right now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting.
So anyway, we know God put the army to sleep, right?
Yes.
Cool. Anyway, let's get to David now just rubbing it in Abner's face.
My favorite character
really
in all of
rubs it in his
Samuel.
face.
Yeah. Abner.
I do like Abner. Growing up reading 1 Samuel, for whatever reason, I was like, Abner seems cool though, right? But he's the bad guy. Yeah, but like Abner seems cool, right?
Yeah.
Abner, the son of Ner.
Yeah.
Abner, kind of like Saul, just seems like a guy caught up in grander events than he should be caught in.
Yeah, he does just stick his neck out way too far.
Yeah.
Okay. Next section. Then David went over to the other side and stood far off on the top of the hill with a great space between them. And David called to the army and to Abner, son of Ner, saying, will you not answer, Abner? Then Abner answered, who are you who calls to the king? And David said to Abner, are you not a man? Who is like you in Israel? Why then have you not kept watch over your lord, the king? For one of the people came in to destroy the king, your lord. This thing that you have done is not good. As the Lord lives, you deserve to die because you have not kept watch over your lord, the Lord's anointed. And now see where the king's spear is in the jar of water that was at his head.
Hey, little pansy boy, you should die because you couldn't protect him.
You should die, because God forced you to do your job bad.
But here's the thing. Well, yeah, but
That's pretty good.
I don't think David knows the Lord put them to sleep.
Which is kind of... Does he just think he can waltz into Saul's 3,000 strong army without God's protection?
I think he did know. I think it's just a point of saying you're bad.
I think so
What
too.
would be the indication that he would know?
Because
the fact that
3,000
he
men were
waltzed-
asleep.
Yeah, because
He snuck into cities before.
Yeah, but not into the heart of a camp.
To a full city?
cities are fine.
Yeah, but camps are usually everybody's drunk, everybody's crazy.
No, especially
Yeah.
No.
with Abner being asleep and the entire guard being asleep. It is a pretty wacky circumstance that would happen the exact moment that you're
I
going
think it's
in.
more of a dig.
Yeah,
No,
it is 100%
no.
a dig.
I think it's a dig, but I don't think he knows that the Lord put the army to sleep.
I think he does. I think he does, and he
too.
doesn't care. Because he's just digging on Abner.
I mean, I guess so.
So I will
Here's my
admit-
argument, because funny.
Well, Abner keeps following Saul.
It's a very good hermeneutic you have
No
there.
problem.
Okay, I might be just jumping ahead. I haven't read this part of Samuel in a long time. Is Abner the one who kills Saul, his armor bearer?
What?
Like when Saul dies. Spoilers, Saul dies.
What? No.
Yeah. Is it Abner who's with him who kills him when he falls on his sword?
No.
No.
No, I think
No.
that's just, I don't even think he's named.
I'm shocked
Okay.
Abner somehow makes it out of that army, though, out of that battle.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll get there.
Not today, but yes.
Yeah. So David calls him out. You deserve to die. You had one job, man. You're the king's guard. Do it.
You're a man, aren't you?
Aren't you a man?
Who is like you? Apparently everyone.
It's
Yeah.
pretty good.
Now Saul recognized David's voice and said, "Is this your voice, my son David?" I love every time Saul jumps into the conversation because this is another one of those similarities between these two stories where like Saul talks and he's like, "Hey, is that David?"
Yeah.
"Hey, is that you?"
I don't think he recognizes David as often as he should. Is that you?
Saul recognized David's voice and said, "Is that your voice, my son David?" And David said, "It is my voice, my lord, O king." And he said, "Why does my lord pursue after his servant? For what have I done? What evil is in my hands? What evil is on my hands? Now therefore let my lord and king hear the words of his servant. If it is the Lord who has stirred up against me, may he accept an offering. But if it is men, may they be cursed before the Lord, for they have driven me out this day, that I should have no share in the heritage of the Lord, saying, Go, serve other gods. Now therefore let not my blood fall to the earth away from the presence of the Lord. For the king of Israel has come out to seek a single flea like one who hunts a partridge in the mountains."
In the pear tree?
Yes. This is the second time David compares himself to an animal.
Here's one of the bitter things that I found in contrasting 24 and 26. 24:11. It's when David's. It's the comparable scene of this. Verse 11. "See my father. See the corner of your robe in my hand."
Mhm.
Right. And then multiple times, and he says, I think he alludes to Saul as his father because his father-in-law.
Yep.
Twice, if my memory's right, in 24. And then in 26, it's Saul who's the one going, "My son," and yet David doesn't respond back with the familial vocabulary. Interesting.
It's true. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And so whether or not that's like
I never
super in there, it is weird because it kind of it's
It's
a
as if David's burned now.
Yeah, it's like a bitter. They
Yeah.
can't connect on the way that they're supposed to as father and son. Sure, by marriage, but father and son, they can't.
Yeah.
And we already know there's a massive disconnect in the relationship at this point because of how the next
Everything.
especially how the next chapter starts.
Yeah.
All of this peace talk, all this, and he's like, "Yeah, I don't believe you," but
Yeah.
It's weird.
I think you might be onto something. It's very interesting. It's on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Besides that, when he says if people have done it, they've driven me today from my share in the Lord's inheritance. What is that? Because they are trying to drive David away from God, or is that because they're trying to kill him? Because the next verse talks about how they're trying to drive him away, but I thought they were talking about whether or not people or God have told him to be turned over.
Well, there is a tie there between the gods, foreign gods, and foreign land.
Yeah.
Because Israel's referred to as the Lord's inheritance.
Right.
Enotheism.
Yeah. And so he's basically saying, are you driving me out of the land and worship of God so that my blood doesn't spill on the land of Israel?
Yeah.
That
There's-
makes sense.
Yeah.
Very popular
Makes
in
a
that
lot of
time
sense,
is that deities are quote unquote located over the region.
Regional locked. Yeah.
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 Regional locked deities. Yeah. Very popular in that time.
Yep.
Henotheism is the word you said.
Yeah.
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 That's what that idea is.
Yeah.
So
So
you see certain times in the Old Testament where there's like maybe some buy-in with it, but then there's some strict. It's clearly not endorsed by much of the Old Testament. Like think about it, the entirety of Exodus is just, hey, in your land, no.
yeah.
Yeah. Like a large part of Genesis.
I am
is that too.
judging the gods of Egypt.
Yeah, in their land.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Takes on Raw.
So the Bible's very not henotheistic, but they do play into the tropes of henotheism quite a
Well,
lot.
it seems like people in the Old Testament sometimes.
So Michael Heiser talks about this quite a bit.
Mhm.
But his kind of framing of it from a Old Testament, ancient Near East kind of Israelite mindset. The Heavenly Council
Divine Council
is in the Divine Council, Heavenly Council, whichever one. If you haven't heard of that term, Psalm 82, verse 1.
Angels.
Super weird that he's in a council of his angels. Anyways, there's this whole idea that when we talk about the inheritance of the gods or whatever, that is kind of tangential to
This
henotheism,
passage. Yeah.
to this passage, and terminology like this, that it could be God has angels that are over different nations.
Well, it would be specifically not angels.
Angels rebel, is what I was going to say.
Well, no. But it's other spirit beings in his articulation.
Yeah, that there would be demonic influences.
Yeah. No. But I'm saying that the members of the divine council in his articulation are not angels, but other spiritual beings.
We use angels as a catch term often for yeah.
He has some very interesting stuff, and even he says, "Yeah, this is pretty wild, but we're going to talk about it anyway."
Also, that might be alluded to in Daniel.
Yeah.
Well,
That's what I was going to talk about.
It's also
too far
mentioned
the
in
future, so I won't
Deuteronomy,
mention it.
the last chapter in Deuteronomy, in Moses' prayer.
Let's just say there's a whole study around maybe
Godly counsel.
godly counsel, Old Testament articulation of deities and their relationship to stewarding the earth, quote
And
unquote,
spirits.
kind
Yeah.
of, and how that works with God ruling over the earth in from the top of sovereignty, and how that plays into Israel as a nation of God's own.
Right. And the inheritance, which is the land of Israel, would belong to him because of it,
Yeah, and how much of that is
because he rules over it.
explicitly taught in the Old Testament, or just the Old Testament's people of the Old Testament's time understanding. You could debate about that all the time. There's tons of books and stuff on that. But anyway,
But keep in mind the mind of the audience when the book was first written. Anyways, let's
No, Joel, that was a very
hop
good.
back on. I hope that was thorough enough, because sometimes I feel like when I talk about Heiser stuff, it's just so shotgunned.
It's crazy because it upends our entire understanding of the celestial.
Can you remind me who Heiser is?
Unseen Realms
Okay,
is his book. Yeah. He also breaks it down into some smaller ones. What is it? Supernatural and Angels and Demons.
Yeah.
but not the Dan Brown book. Angels is one book, Demons is another book.
Yeah. Also Supernatural, not like the bingeable Netflix show or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Because the point you were going to make with Michael Heiser's view is that in the divine council, God gave the other nations to other beings, the other gods, to watch over. And he specifically took Israel as his
By
inheritance.
other gods, we mean spirits, not God.
Yes.
Well, they call them Elohim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in the Old Testament mind, that might be a classification of being,
yeah.
of spiritual being, not what we know by
Yeah. When
Aquinas understanding of deity.
yeah, for the layman, when the Old Testament says a god, it is not the same idea as like a Greek god like Zeus. It is a spiritual entity.
Yeah.
And
Think like an Arabian jinn in 1001 Arabian Nights, which I think I'm the only one
a
who's
genie under that same
I do know what you mean, though.
entity would be called an Elohim.
Yeah. And again, this is not to be read outside of the context of the Old Testament. I really think it's very difficult to continue that into a New Testament reading.
Yeah.
Because if anything, the
Give me
conquest of
time.
Canaan and the kind of taking out, anyways, it's a whole thing. We're not going to get into that for this episode.
And it's pretty crazy. We have kind of loaded all of this onto this one verse to talk about the divine council, but we could do an episode on it.
Yeah, but it does kind of imply with the whole oh, you're going to kick me out so I have to die outside of Israel away from God's presence?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is that in that statement is kind of presupposing all of this.
Yeah. There's an understanding of the spiritual world that they have that is not ours.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's not modern biblical either.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Anyway, before we start arguing about it, carry on, Josh.
Joel, good job. Then Saul said,
I got a
I have
sticker.
sinned.
Okay.
Then Saul said, I have sinned. Return, my son David, for I will no more do you harm, because my life was precious in your eyes this day. Behold, I have acted foolishly and have made a great mistake. And David answered and said, Here is the spear, O king. Let one of the young men come over and take it. And the Lord rewards every man for his righteousness and his faithfulness. For the Lord gave you into my hand today, and I would not put out my hand against the Lord's anointed. Behold, as your life was precious this day in my sight, so may my life be precious in the sight of the Lord, and may he deliver me out of all tribulation. Then Saul said to David, Blessed be you, my son David. You will do many things and will succeed in them. So David went on his way, and Saul returned to his place.
And David this whole time's like,
Press X to doubt.
yeah, sure, there's Stad.
Stad.
I almost said sir.
I mean, that does seem to be his attitude.
Yeah. Actually,
he's not
sir is
calling
more
him
than
dad anymore.
Yeah.
There's a... Oh, that's...
Is this
Oh,
a thought
no.
in real time?
It's a thought in real time.
I know that face.
Yeah, sorry. There's a... You know, we've talked about like the idea of David being he's taking on like the weapons and the identity of Goliath in front of Saul. Like we've referenced that many times. Like he has a sword. He's now the one that's empowered, that is opposing. He fights with the Philistines against Saul.
That comes in a bit.
Yeah. And then also the idea of like, now that Saul is not obeying the Lord, he's willing to do all the things that he should have done, like devoting a city to destruction and blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
Right. He's now actively seeking out to destroy this individual that has an identity like Goliath, whereas before he was a coward.
Oh, that's kind of funny.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's there.
No, but it's
Monkey
interesting.
does see pattern.
He's flopped. He now has conviction to like.
I mean, it's an interesting thought. I will admit, listening to the other episodes where this was the
Mhm.
Goliath thing was brought up, there were times where I was like, yes, and times where I was like, absolutely not. But
Well, here we go. The biggest pattern with David and Goliath is
they're the same person.
he goes to the Philistines.
Yeah.
as an exile.
He becomes a champion and works for the king of Gath, which is crazy.
Yes. So this leads us to chapter 27.
Mhm.
Then David said in his heart, Now I shall perish one day by the hand of Saul. There is nothing better for me than that. I should escape on the land of the Philistines. Then Saul will despair of seeking me any longer within the borders of Israel, and I shall escape out of his hand. So David arose and went over, he and the 600 who were with him, to Achish, the son of Maoch, king of Gath. And David lived with Achish at Gath, he and his men, every man with his household, and David went with his 2 wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail of Carmel, Nabal's widow. And when it was told Saul and David had fled to Gath, he no longer sought him.
He did this before.
Mm-hmm.
He did this in chapter 21. And didn't play out this way, though.
Nope.
It's funny that Abigail's still there.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, like she was mentioned before, and it's kind of one of those one-off stories. Like Michael's not even mentioned again for quite a while.
Yeah, but that's because she's married to someone else. It's super sad when the reunion's sad. Anyway, we'll get there.
I do have something to say. I don't know how interesting it actually is. It'll be interesting to talk about. Is there a theological connotation to a king or the leader of a nation, or the one specifically the anointed of God, going to a foreign country to escape the political persecution?
Everybody does it.
Well, that's the thing. Is that just a political thing you do? Because obviously the king can't just march an army into Egypt.
Jesus.
Well, I was going to say, you have so many, like
Mhm.
you have Moses. That's more in Egypt, fleeing out of Egypt.
Yep, which is fine.
Sure.
It's the same thing.
You have David. You have Jeroboam. You have Jesus. Like these significant anointed figures being, and specifically kings. I forgot about Moses, but even Jacob. running to a different country and coming back once the political instability is sort of over.
It's a consistent theme of exile, like leaving the land and coming back with more.
Yep.
But it's also politically beneficial for Achish to have David.
Oh, absolutely.
And to prop him up and send him back. Because then it dismantles the functioning of Israel when he wants to then attack Israel.
Kind of.
Or
Kind
an
of.
alliance.
There's a
peace
lot
between
of,
them.
yeah. I think it's probably more like that.
Yeah.
More the alliance route, or more like if we help him out, maybe. It does seem perhaps. There's many, like in geopolitics, there's many ways that the Philistines could have played this out. This is one of the ways. Okay.
Yeah.
But is there something like not just political behind him running to another nation? Is there, like, you have the theological, like you're saying, of exile going out and God providing anyways? I think that's can be applied and make sense and read into because that's how God's nature is. But is there a specific point that the Bible would be trying to make in any of these circumstances that isn't just that's what you do if you're running from political persecution?
Don't know. There might be. Is that true?
I can't think of the theological purpose of it. Like, other than just mimicking exile. Right.
I would the one I would point to is kind of what Josh was saying, is that you have to fully depend on the Lord, and then you come back fully dependent on the Lord. It's not that you weren't before necessarily, but in a foreign land, it's similar to the wilderness. You are an outsider. You are not part of those people. You are.
Yeah,
it's only God's hand over you.
That's just a more developed idea of the exile.
Yeah.
I want to say something like there's a tie-in with Gentiles, but I don't think there actually is.
Like
I think it has
type
more.
deal?
I think it has more
I
to
don't
do
think
with
it's-
like the Ezekiel idea of like, I'll call my people back home.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
they're scattered, but I will call them back home. And the reason they're scattered is because of that, like the turmoil or the judgment on.
But the difference is that's judgment brought upon them.
Yep.
And so bringing them back together is presented as a quote unquote blessing, whereas articulated in both Jesus and Moses and this escape is articulated as a blessing.
Yes.
So I don't know if it's a 1-to-1 to draw things in like the Ezekiel, like those regathering passages. Although there's a pattern there that does play. They might be parallel, but I don't know if you can read over to one another. You know what I mean?
Just think about
Yes.
it, though. Throughout the Bible, there's a lot of leaving and coming back. Like Genesis, everybody in Genesis does that pretty much.
But I also
The
don't.
main ones.
The only point I would disagree is that I don't think the leaving is blessing, because he doesn't want to leave.
Sure, but he escapes.
Yes.
Right? Like it is God providing a way out. It's not desirable.
Yeah.
It's not presented as like this is a consequence of judgment.
Yeah. It's also.
However, unless you want to articulate
Yeah, I
that the
agree
actual
with that.
exile into Babylon was because those were the ones who do come back. Those are the ones who, the remnant that God is keeping, the ones who
they're
stayed were the
escaping from
ones
the
who,
sinful state.
you could present that the Babylonian exile is blessing. And you could make that argument.
Well, it's
I
a
mean,
form of cleansing for sure of Israel, but that's less for the people who are being exiled.
well, I know, but the way you would go is you would go with the Jeremiah passage of my plans are to benefit, like bless you.
Yeah.
Of the like,
Yeah.
in going into captivity, this is good.
Yeah.
So never mind. I just came around to Josh and I might agree.
Yeah.
Interesting. Sorry.
That it sucks. You don't want to leave, but it is a
Because
necessary good, because when you come back, it'll be better.
Yeah. Also, the ones who remain in the Babylonian exile are the ones who are punished.
Yeah.
Anyway,
But with David here, is part of the, I don't want to say the theme because I think I say that a lot, but is that he is leaving to Philistine lands to be in the protection of God? Is that like,
I think he's just fleeing Saul.
okay?
Because I think that's kind of like, what are your guys' thoughts on comparing this passage to that what happened in chapter 21? Because same king, same thing. and yet very different outcome.
Well, it
Is
makes sense that he would go back to somebody he knows rather than just another guy.
Sure.
Also, the Philistines being an enemy of Saul's in which he is terrified of.
But
That's a
previously,
safe place.
The
But
The
there's
men-
an important.
the men like Akish's men were like, hey, this is David. This is the
Yeah.
big hero in
Mhm.
the Israelites' big hero. And then David's like, oh no, they know that I'm here. Like, what do I? And then he just acts crazy. And Akish is like, what do you want me to do with this crazy dude? Get him out of here.
Mhm.
Right. This is a different situation. Why is David not afraid of Akish knowing who he really is? Why are Akish's men not out to get him to kill David? Even though that might be a kind of implied that they don't trust him later on in this passage, later on in this book.
Mhm.
That's not the same story as what was presented in 21, which is, hey, this guy's a real threat. Like there's a difference between he's a liability and a threat. He's
Yeah.
a threat in 21. He's a liability later on.
Well, considering
You know what I mean?
Considering what David did to the Philistines in the past.
Oh, yeah.
Before chapter 21.
Dude, he killed 200 of them just to get married.
I know, it's great.
100 more than he needed.
Yeah.
And mutilated their corpse.
Doesn't say he killed him.
It will. It's. You're right. Which
Okay.
is more
Surprise
horrifying.
circumcision.
It also could be that the
Part of the
fact that
covenant now.
the fact that like if it is that he comes back, right, and it's not just the same thing through re-editing stuff like that,
Right.
it could be that they're like, if the guy has the balls to come back, like
Well,
he's obviously not terrified of us.
Unless he is presenting himself as the new Goliath.
Well, here's the thing. If
I
he's-
think that's more of just like a
If he comes in to serve as a champion,
yes
which he would have like
status.
a legend behind him, essentially. And if Goliath did occupy that space of legend, because Goliath meaning exile means he may have actually just been in a very similar position to David.
Yeah.
Especially if, I'm not going to get into the depth of that, but why would they be angry at him? He rightfully defeated their champion in battle.
Mhm.
He did his job, right? So it's one of those things that's like, you want the best guy working for you,
Yeah.
right? I don't know. It seems like there wouldn't be animosity between them.
so
Even though
I think
politically they would be enemies.
I think there's a change, something going on
Yeah.
in the political response to David
Mm-hmm.
by the Philistines.
Yeah.
We're not
agree.
privy to it.
I might be jumping ahead to the next verse that we might read.
It will help.
Josh, do you want to read the next verse?
Yeah.
Or next section of verses?
Yeah, I think I
That's
can
just
read
the
that.
next verse.
I can do the best I can do. I'll just read the rest of the chapter. Where are we?
It's verse 5.
Yeah, that's where we are. Then David said to Achish, "If I have found favor in your eyes, let a place be given to me in one of the country towns, that I may dwell there. For why should your servant dwell in the royal city with you?" So that day Achish gave him Ziklag. Therefore Ziklag has belonged to the king of Judah to this day, and the number of the days that the Lord lived in the country of the Philistines was 1 year and 4 months.
The kings of Judah. Wait a second. I thought it was United Territory.
The kings of Judah. What does it say there?
Yeah.
Yeah. It says it has belonged to the kings of Judah ever since. So, at least in terms of authorship, it's implying that.
Think so.
Like most
No.
historical
No.
documents, it was written after it happened.
This is true. You're probably right. You're probably right. Can I just propose an alternate idea?
Yeah.
That that the king of Judah personally
Mm.
owns that city.
Right.
Personal ownership. Not he is the king of those things.
Oh,
But it is personally his city.
Right. But it does
Much
say
like how-
kings, plural of Judah.
Yeah, because that position, that family, that dynasty
that's cool.
have personal reign over that, has personal ownership over that city.
So you mean like of the tribe of Judah, there is their city?
You know what I mean?
During this time, they would have had a king, but over that specific city.
Because like you'll see in other systems. Like here's an easy one because we kind of know this one. Like in Germany, you'd have a baron, right? It would be like
feudalism.
yeah, you'd have right there.
Yeah, my bike fell out. Anyways, continue.
My ears.
Yeah,
Sorry about that.
anyway, so in Germany, like you have like a baron that would be like, this is his town, right? This is what he's responsible for. This is his thing. But the king would be over the entire land.
Right.
But that baron, that is specifically his. But sometimes kings would actually have their own
Crown land. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they would have ownership over that village like the baron. That doesn't mean that he's any less the king over the entire land.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's true.
Although I do agree that this is written during the divided kingdom. That could be an alternate reading of that.
Well, that's the term.
Right.
I'm confused with the king of Judah. Israel and Judah are not split yet.
No, not here.
That's
Well, I think that's the point that Colton was making.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
it would have said kings of Israel.
It says
I-
both
I-
belonged
beforehand.
past tense to the kings of Israel.
I suppose. I guess I'm arguing.
But
that
you're,
it's,
you're right. It could be crowned like a king's
yeah.
land.
I guess I'm arguing for a different point in that sentence.
Even though you don't fully disagree. With
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I just
No, I get
apparently
it.
I just wanted to go
Yeah.
on a rant.
No, that's fine.
Which would put
Fair enough.
you're saying it would put the authorship of at least this story
Mhm.
after Solomon,
Yes, but also, I
after
also
Rehoboam and Jeroboam.
yeah, I also think it's interesting because if it's saying it's belonged to them ever since, is there a way of taking that verse, reading back to the previous one that does David gain it because that's a cultural tradition? If you're like a foreign exile or whatever, that the king would give you land, or is it basically a threat that he's bringing all these men and he's like, I'm going to be friendly with you, just give me a place to live?
That could be.
Because for me, it reads as a threat, which is why it belongs to him ever since. He basically occupies it as its ruler, although he swears fealty to the king. He basically demands to become like you're saying, a baron or a local lord of this small town.
Low level royalty.
Yeah, which then gets inherited into Israel when he becomes king.
Yeah, I mean, Egyptians would have done that. They paid so many people on land. I think that's part of the thing that happens with Abraham. He starts giving him land because it's like, oh, this guy is amassing so much wealth that I should probably give him a place before he starts encroaching on my own territory.
Right, starts demanding.
And so is that kind of what you're proposing there? Is that, you know,
he either gives it to him because this is a cultural tradition of the time, a political one, or David basically comes down and demands land, and the king can't do anything about
There's
it.
also it's also maybe reasonable. I have to research this. This is a new idea for me as well. I wonder, was that one of the towns that is along the border that likely would have changed hands and may have a Jewish population in it?
I don't know.
Because they did change
Because it is in the
lands a
countryside.
lot.
They
Right.
did, yeah.
And so I wonder if it's,
Yeah.
That's
deal with
very
your own
possible.
people.
Yeah,
And then
it's
you
very
also
possible.
have a similar thing with when Abraham, who goes in with a lot of people into Egypt, and they give him that city of Goshen for his descendants.
yeah.
Sorry,
Not Abraham.
Jacob and his family.
Yeah.
They go in with a lot of servants and a lot of men that they inherited from Abraham.
Yeah.
And then the Pharaoh gives them that special
Well,
land.
If it is like that, that's the thing, is that we were talking before about why does David come? Why is it different this time? It could be the difference between like if he was acting crazy before and so he's pitied by the king, whereas now he comes as a threat, but one that's actually taken seriously, and so he deals with it by giving him land. Or it's the crazy before and now he's friendly with him.
I do think
And that one
later
seems more
on,
disconnected to me.
Akish does seem to trust David.
Right.
It's his other generals do not. His other leaders don't.
Which they shouldn't.
Yeah, which justified.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if it's best to frame it as a threat. It could be a threat,
Okay.
and then Akish kind of comes around, and they develop a quote unquote, albeit lying relationship built on a
Yeah,
lie,
it's not
but a
great.
decent relationship. Or it might not, or it might be legitimately David's like, hey, you know that I'm a threat to Saul. You know I'm on the run. I have this band of dudes.
Just give me a small place to live.
Yeah. Like you had a champion warrior before.
Mhm.
What's wrong?
So the position of it places it like Ziklag is not exactly known, but both places that people think it could be, because of the name no longer Sinai Peninsula in the Negev desert.
Oh.
And it places him in between Philistia and Edom and Midian.
Yep.
And so
So
basically
it's out of the way.
it's out of the way, and basically they're using him as a military deterrent.
Which the later
From
verses
Edom and
seem
Midia.
to- yeah,
Fair enough. Okay.
Yeah.
that
Okay.
makes sense.
And so basically it's like, yeah, you go over there. I don't have to watch you because you're constantly going to be being assailed by Edom and Midianite
Yeah,
raiders.
you're gonna have bigger problems.
You have bigger problems, and you're protecting me from my south side.
Yeah.
Because you're an amazing warrior.
Buffer zone.
Yeah. So it benefits him.
Yeah, but
Okay.
that's
again, same
mostly
commentary.
tentative
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
we
it's
don't know
not
the
for sure.
location.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's probably near the Negev though, because all of the things he fights are on the Negev.
That makes sense.
Yeah. That leads us to the end of chapter 27. Now, David and his men went up and made raids against the Geshurites and the Girzites and the Amalekites. For these were the inhabitants of the land from old, as far as Shur to the land of Egypt. And David would strike the land and would leave neither man or woman alive, but would take away the sheep, the oxen, and the donkeys, and the camels, and the garments, and came back to Achish. When Achish asked, "Where have you made a raid today?" David would say, "Against the Negeb of Judah, or against the Negeb of the Jerahmeelites, or against the Negeb of the Kenites." And David would leave neither man nor woman alive to bring news to Gath, thinking, lest they should tell about us and say, "So David has done." Such was his custom all the days he lived in the country of the Philistines. And Achish trusted David, thinking, "He has made himself as utter stench to his people Israel. Therefore, he shall always be my servant."
Question.
So he kills a bunch of Israelites, right? Is that your question?
No.
Oh.
Question. He fights the Amalekites.
Mm-hmm.
Aren't all the Amalekites wiped out by Saul in chapter 15? Says so. It says all.
Mm-hmm.
Well, all except for this one guy.
All except for the king, which Samuel summarily butchers.
Yeah, he does.
That's
means-
terrifying.
Or does it just mean that, most things, like sometimes when it says all, it's hyperbole?
Yeah.
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 All the ones
Like-
in that area.
Or there's an interesting defense that I've heard from is that when it said they destroyed all the people in the city, right? That doesn't mean all the ones that escaped when they knew the battle was coming.
Mhm.
And so it's
the
like
ones who remain.
the women and children would leave that knew the battle was coming. If the city was good, there would be the people that escaped and the people that remained because they did not want to leave the city, either because of cowardice or because it was a religiously significant place or because of it's
Yeah,
my
that
home
doesn't
and
often
stuff like
happen.
that.
Oftentimes people
Yeah.
will just remain in the city because it is your
Mhm.
best shot at survival.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, you're gonna.
It's high cost. It's best shot of survival and the best way to get summarily
Unless
murdered.
in the Canaanite invasion with Joshua, you're specifically known for having the ability to make walls useless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you meet in the field anyway.
Yeah.
It's true.
Either way, just wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
But
Saul's not good at his job.
When no, he's not. When David raids the cities and kills all the men and women, now it kind of is similar to how the kings are meant to destroy everything, except this isn't for religious reasons. And the next two verses say why he's killing the men and women, so that no one can talk about it.
Yeah.
But he is raiding Israel. He's raiding Judah. He's raiding whatever that guy's name is, and the Kenites.
Well,
Which are in
he's
Israel.
saying that he is. That's what he tells them.
Right. Because he's not actually doing that. I misread that
That's okay.
twice.
Here's the thing. Some people, I'm not in this group of people, but some people would go, "This is propaganda." And David was actually just raiding the Israelites. Now, that does kind of go directly against what that text is specifically saying.
Yep.
But some in the more liberal theology category would say that.
Because it would be very common for a lot of historical sources outside of the Bible to use propaganda this way.
Yep.
Right. It's like, oh yeah, this reads exactly like, a story that's supposed to venerate this person, but in actuality, it's like, no, they were just on their own stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Kind of
Yeah.
like how, what's his name? Why can't I think of the Persian king that rises?
Cyrus.
Cyrus.
So,
Xerxes?
no.
Xerxes.
Mm.
Darius.
Darius, yeah.
Darius
is
the
right.
Mede.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely. The other guy was an imposter. For sure. Anyway,
That's a different Darius.
I love Darius the Mede.
Mm-hmm.
That's Darius, the son
Colton, I
of
heard that.
Cambyses,
Thank you.
not
Yes.
Darius from Daniel.
yes, but
Okay,
the Darius that was campaigning in Egypt,
Yeah.
along with the king at that point. Anyways, not to get all caught up in
Yeah.
history of that. Either way, he ascends the throne, kills probably the legitimate kings,
Yeah.
and then goes, they were all imposters.
I'm
See?
the real king.
Here's a book that says why.
Yeah.
Propaganda.
Yeah.
It does kind of seem that. Like,
Yeah, but
that happens all the time.
and this reads similar to that, although it's at least from what I can read, this seems fairly reasonable what he does. It doesn't have to be propaganda. It's not like, oh, this is some miracle happened. This is unreasonable. It's like, no, he lived in a foreign land and said he was killing his own people, but actually he was killing all their people. Not their people.
Well, it wouldn't
but
be their people. It would be the Edomites and the
the Amalekites.
Moabites.
Which
Yeah.
are around him. It's his
Yep.
border. He's out of the way. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Well, and the Edomites are cousins.
Yeah, he is
Yeah.
kind of killing his cousins. But I mean, they betray.
Israel later on.
Yeah.
Maybe because of this.
Is he killing
Who
the?
knows?
Is he killing the?
No, that would just be the location
Moabites?
where he's bordering on the Negeb.
Right. I
So
thought that was the Edomites.
the Edomites and the Moabites.
Oh, and the Moabites. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're neighbors.
I need a map.
Yeah. Yeah. So that
I mean, the historical doubt comes from too good to be true.
It's also, he is summarily, just for his own political covering his steps, he is summarily executing just
Yeah.
massive amounts of people.
and it,
All men and all women. So who's going to say anything against him?
Yeah.
Who's going to come to the king of Gath and be
This
like,
is-
nah, he killed our city?
well, and here's the I think we've made this point before, at least I have. David is not a good guy. He's chosen by God and constantly is trying
Well,
to
when you say he's not a good guy, that makes it sound like he's a bad guy.
he is.
I don't know if I go that far.
He's a warlord.
Oh, I agree with that.
Yeah. No. None of us, if David was alive today, we would all, other than his faith to God and his constant repentance of his evil actions, we would not say he's good.
Well, that usually comes with us being Christians and not like if Jesus never came and the same thing that happened today, like, okay, never mind. Morals would be completely different.
They would be. I'm just saying that we would evidenced
The only thing I
Samuel.
contribute to my salvation is my sin. So
Yes.
Well, the things that all the people he kills are those who are already devoted to destruction.
are they?
As far as I'm aware, even the Edomites, I think.
I don't think so.
I know the Moabites are, but
Oh, the Edomites would absolutely be
Devoted to destruction?
yeah, because
They
I
were
think
in
the
the-
thing
in
with
Canaan.
Esau.
before they were
Is-
called out of Egypt.
I don't know about.
Because
that.
if I remember, in the law, the Edomites are excluded because they are the sons of Esau.
Uh-huh.
Oh
Mhm.
shoot! Okay,
But-
I missed that.
But I can't remember if it's at this point in Judges or Joshua or one of those places. But I thought they were already said to lumped in with the Canaanites because too much time has passed and too much whatever.
Anyway, regardless,
All I'm saying is that the comparison between David and Saul being presented in the text is what their relationship is with God
yes.
and what God's relationship is with them. And so,
What?
The difference between David and Saul is their relationship with God, not the actions they commit.
Yeah, but the relationship with God
Yes.
often manifests in the actions that they do or do not commit.
Yeah.
It does. But we've even seen David's with the relationship with Abigail, with the relationship previously.
God
David has
stops
this-
him from sinning.
Yeah. Well, no, but that's what I mean is that he has the same murderous intent, but when God steps in the way, he repents,
Mhm.
where he has contrition, whereas Saul has attrition.
Yes.
He just doesn't want to feel the bad guilt anymore.
It's actually a perfect way of. It's a perfect example. We should have used that in our confession episode.
I did.
We did.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm
Yeah.
just
And so
Forgetful.
that's what I mean is that David and Saul do the same things.
yes, but I don't know. I don't agree that they're very similar.
I don't know if I'd say they're similar or that they do the exact same things, but I also don't know if I'd go as far as saying that David's just a good man.
Yeah.
And the comment section is going to say, hey, what about David being a man after God's own heart? We'll talk about it. But I feel like that is disproven over and over.
That he was a man after God's own heart?
No, that just because you're a man after God's own heart doesn't mean that you are of moral purity.
Yeah.
It's that you are
You're the man chosen
following
by God.
what God tells you to do. Doesn't mean
More about posture.
yeah.
Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
this has been an interesting episode. We got a couple more verses.
Yes.
The last two.
Let me
Do we?
read them.
Oh yeah, we do too.
In those days, the Philistines gathered their forces for war to fight against Israel. And Achish said to David, understand that you and your men are to go out with me in the army. David said to Achish, very well, you shall know what your servant can do. And Achish said to David, very well, I will make you my bodyguard for life.
Very well, you shall know what your servant can do. That is awesome.
Point me in the right direction, boss. I'll kill anything for you.
Except for the Lord's anointed, but he doesn't tell him that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I won't kill the king, which is a weird thing to say.
It's also interesting. He makes him his bodyguard, which means he actually wouldn't be in the front lines,
Mhm.
No.
thus limiting the likelihood that he would actually come against Israelites.
Unless the bodyguard thing is after the
Fair.
battle.
But you know what I mean?
Mhm.
That's I might be reading into it there, blah blah blah. But I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Unless Achish has the intent to go into the front.
Which isn't the most uncommon. It just
Yeah.
becomes more common like 1,000 years later.
Yeah.
With the bodyguard thing, it's similar to the practice of the time that even David with his mighty men, you take a man
Yep.
from a foreign nation, make him your bodyguard because he doesn't have political leanings for or against factions in your own country.
Mhm.
However, here he has big reasons to not like the king because he's a Philistine, but
Yeah.
that's not gotten into here.
No, it's very interesting.
It's kind of surprising how much he just kind of like gives in, right? Not really giving in, but like he just
I mean, Akin seems like a. Here's the thing: he's a Philistine.
chill dude.
Seems like a pretty chill dude. He shows up and he's like, "This is crazy, man. I have enough crazy people. Get him out of here." And he shows up later. Hey,
You want to be my bodyguard?
he's like, "Hey, can you? I got like me 600 pounds. I'm champion of Israel. The king's trying to kill me. What
Yeah.
you got for me? Here's a city. Guard my south and just help us out. Cool. Hey, you're really successful at that. You want to like help us out on the battlefield? Absolutely.
I'll show you.
I can be the best. That's awesome. Make you my bodyguard for life.
Go get
Yeah.
an attitude.
Akin,
Yeah.
but
Well, here's the other
The
thing.
second time. The
This
second time
is-
he's heavily duped.
That there's a similar pattern. Israel goes out to war. David goes out to war for Saul, and then Saul makes him a member of his inner court.
Mhm.
And so, like in the proving of his military prowess, he's brought close to the king.
Well, it
In both
shows,
cases.
Yeah, it also shows his ability for leadership,
Yeah,
which is interesting, and well, specifically combat.
yeah. No, but I just think that's a very interesting parallel because, like, he went from defeating a Philistine to becoming a member of the Israel's high court, and then in this story, if David is telling the Philistines that he's killing Israelites and then becomes a member of the high court of the Philistines. He's killing Israelites. He's now becoming the member of the. So it's like he's now
It's an
killing
inversion.
the opposite group and becomes the king, second to the king on the other side.
man, so good he'll rise to the top in any system.
Yeah.
Much like most of the Lord's anointed or those he's chosen.
Yeah. So then
Hmm.
that leads us to a little arc where David is working with the Philistines.
Are we?
Well,
Are we
first,
covering
first
it?
you get the whole voodoo stuff, but we're not going to talk about
Yeah.
that today.
Saul the
I
medium
am
of Endor.
so
My
excited
favorite.
about that. That's
So
going to be
good.
fun.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite stories in the Old Testament.
Before the
We're
next
almost
episode,
on the book.
where's your position on it? Was that actually Saul?
What?
Rapid
Hot
fire?
take?
Not
Samuel?
Sorry. Was it actually Samuel?
With Endor?
Yeah. It's too pointed for him to not have that kind of relationship with Saul.
We'll see if
already.
after
Well-
studying if we have the same opinions.
Well, here's the important question. How did Saul get the Ewoks?
True.
Josh is yes. Joel,
Sorry.
what are you?
Um,
Is that actually Samuel?
I think this is the first occurrence of Solomon's ring. Anyways.
No, we're not bringing up that Solomon's seal.
I'm trying to play a game.
Solomon's seal. It's an aquatic animal that communes with the dead.
Anyways.
Sorry, yes, I think it was Samuel.
Cool. Colton.
I also think it was Samuel.
Okay, we're all in agreement. I actually think it was Samuel.
Wait, you think it was Samuel? I thought you didn't.
Why not?
Well, you
never mind.
asked the question as if it was going to be a hotly debated
It
topic.
is a hotly debated topic. We're just all,
It is
you
a
know,
hot topic, yeah.
I think
who like-
most readers reading it would go, that's Samuel.
Yeah.
It's too cool not to believe.
Well, the way he responds, he's just got
He just slaps
he's
Saul
got
and
too
moves
much
on.
beef with Saul not to respond like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll
That's
get
a
into it.
man who's being tortured into the grave because of Saul's actions.
And he brought up another man out of the grave to torture him more into the grave.
Yeah, like this is a real version of the like John will turn in his grave if I say this.
Anyway,
Yeah,
we will save all of this banter for next week.
I'm starting right now.
When we talk about Endor, but this has been chapters 26 to 28, verse
Ish.
2 of Samuel.
Joel, can you please end the podcast?
I was actually waiting to see if Colton would do the
Yeah, I
media
was
shoutouts. Because if
realizing
he
that's
was,
not
I was
my
going to
point.
cut him off. Okay. You can reach out to us at secondratesaints@gmail.com if you have any long form questions. If you'd like to check out what we're doing, you can check out secondratesaints.com, where we have links to everything we've been doing, including our means of fundraising. Is that the right way to say it? buymeacoffee.com/secondratesaints for a one-time donation towards whatever we got going on here. If you've enjoyed our content, if you've listened for any amount of time, we would really appreciate your support. Yeah, thanks for listening. We'll be back again with the medium of Endor. Imagine what the large of Endor could do.